cut interest rates again.
Another rate cut? FD rates are already so low. How will I earn a good rate on my spare cash now?
Why not use StashAway Simple?
StashAway Simple?
Yes, StashAway Simple lets you earn a projected rate higher than most FDs without locking up your cash. Just invest and start earning today.
Wow, it is that simple.
Just visit StashAway's website or download the app now.
Terms and conditions apply. Visit stashaway.my for more information.
This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
You're listening to The Morning Run with Lynn, Roshan and Noelle. 7:18 a.m. Wednesday the 9th of September, and in about half an hour we're going to be speaking with Nick Ahmad, Member of Parliament for Setia Wangsa, about the challenges of redevelopment in KL. But in the meantime, let's talk about an e-commerce tax. Because according to reports by Harian Metro and Malaysia Kini, the Deputy Communications and Multimedia Minister, Datuk Zahidi Zainul Abidin, has said that the government is planning to introduce a new service tax for online shopping at a rate of about 0.02%. So the Deputy Minister said the proposed charge could be as low as 20 cent for purchases of between 200 and 1,000 ringgit, but they've yet to set a minimum taxable amount.
At this moment, the proposed e-commerce service tax is in the planning phase by the ministry, and so the good Datuk said that the approach is to find new sources of income to improve communication security, to prevent scams and cyber threats, and also to improve the telco infrastructure in rural developments. But my question is this, right? We have a universal services provision fund, which is, I think, a percentage of revenue levy on telcos. So that fund is actually meant to help improve access. So I'm not sure why we need this additional tax.
And I think our listeners are also wondering, because we've got a poll running on Twitter right now, should consumers be taxed for e-commerce transactions? Only 2.5% say yes, 76% say no, 16% say not yet, and 7% say they're not sure about this.
All right, so to give us a bit more insight, we have on the line with us this morning Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO of the Centre for Market Education, as well as Senior Fellow at Ideas. Carmelo, thank you for joining us. Now, the Communications and Multimedia Minister is looking at additional charges starting at 20 cent for online purchases of above 200 ringgit. Do you think we should be levying additional taxes on online purchases?
I think the issue is a bit complicated in the sense that in a moment of economic difficulties like the ones that we are experiencing now, taxes are never advisable, okay? Because we are trying to revive consumption, to relaunch the economy, and a new tax surely doesn't send the right signal. Secondly, we have to recognize that in the past months has been done a communication effort on pushing online purchases to avoid the physical contact, to reduce physical contact, and to try to reduce the spread of the virus. And somehow, with this proposal, we are going to tax a behavior that we have been trying to incentivize. So in this sense, also there is a contradiction. On the other side, the amount is so limited that probably is not going to discourage online purchases in a sensitive way. Although still I question if this is the better way to achieve what we want to achieve.
Don't think it will. So you don't think it will have a big impact on discouraging e-commerce and digitalization?
No, it's 20 cents on 200 and above. If you think about yourself, you are probably not going to avoid to do this purchase because of 20 cents. You are going to do it anyhow. But I think that the signal that is being sent out is somehow wrong, is mistaken. And secondly, I doubt that implementing this collection will indeed later on bring to the result that the government is trying to achieve.
Now, Carmelo, the government already has the Universal Service Provision, the USP fund, which the telco operators currently contribute about 6% of their top line to. Since the purpose of the USP is to improve communication access to areas which are underserved by the main telco providers, do we need another layer of taxation to raise funds for rural infrastructure development?
I don't believe so, and I'm convinced that government as an entrepreneur developing economic initiatives is quite a contradiction in terms. Not this government, but any government in general. So I would change approach, and rather than collecting contribution from the telco operators to be used for a certain purpose, I would try to engage in a conversation with the telco operators in order to understand if with that money, those infrastructures can be brought in by the telecommunication providers into the underdeveloped areas of Malaysia.
Now, this plan is also being brought up because the ministry is looking for alternative resources which, and I quote, will not burden the people in order to raise funds for rural infrastructure development. What are some other ways that the government might look at instead of this?
I think it's important that the government realize the importance to bring infrastructures to the rural area, although I hope that we don't develop a tendency to policy that is reactive to the news of the moment, to the news of the day. And I think that the best way to develop telecommunication infrastructures in the rural areas is, as I mentioned earlier, to get engaged with telecommunication providers to develop a plan that involve private providers rather than having the government directly involved with an entrepreneurial act.
It's no secret that government coffers are stretched. How else should the government increase revenue? Should we bring back GST, which is a broader base tax than the current sales and service tax structure?
Well, you know that I've been a supporter of GST since 2014. It's probably one of the few. At the end of last year, I published a paper in which I was advocating a return of GST, but I proposed a targeted GST divided in different percentages according to the different goods. So I think that for sure, a way in which GST comes back is one of the way forward for the government to collect more revenues. Of course, this will help, but will not be resolutive of the situation. We are experiencing quite a dramatic moment, and I think we'll have to study slowly some step for a higher degree of return to normality, so that by having businesses growing their revenues, indirectly also government revenues can grow as a consequence.
With the moratorium ending this month and the RMCO being extended until December, what's your gauge of the economic recovery moving forward?
I suspect that we may experience a sort of relapse of the economic crisis in the Q4. In the last month of Q2, we had experienced a rebound, and this was unavoidable because for a while, for a certain period, the economy has been completely shut down, and then gradually some economic sectors have reopened, so a rebound was unavoidable. But I'm afraid that with the end of the loan moratorium, with the end of subsidies, with the restrictions that we have on foreign labor, and with the restriction that we have on international borders, probably we could experience some more difficulties in the last part of the year. So I guess we need a little bit of different pace in bringing back the economy to normality.
Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning, Carmelo. That was Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO of the Centre for Market Education, and it looks like in addition to fears of a possible COVID surge towards winter, we may also have to look out for what Carmelo described as a bit of an economic relapse since the RMCO has been extended. But I think talking about this e-commerce tax, Carmelo is not really much of a fan of it. I think echoing the sentiment of the 79% of voters on our poll, because the question that he posed, which I think is a good one, is this really the best way to go about raising the funds that have been cited, so for rural infrastructure development?
Yes, it doesn't send the right signal in this very slow economy. I think, in fact, people are now asking, well, can you be more transparent about how the USP is being spent, right? Which is a Universal Services Provision Fund. Shouldn't all that money be used for the infrastructure development that that the ministry is asking for. And also, I think, the government's asking us to tighten our belts. I think the government itself also needs to tighten their belts, right? They should tell us how are they saving money.
Yeah, and then there's also the one other element here is whether this impacts e-commerce. But I think also, as reiterated by Carmelo, that a 20-cent fee on 200 ringgit is 0.02%. You're not going to feel that in that transaction. I think it's more just a concern over how this works, the structure around it. And we will get more details because this was only a proposed plan. It's not even gone to cabinet yet, and there's been within cabinet some pushback towards it. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But again, structurally, is this really going to diminish the promise of e-commerce if transactions above 200 ringgit are taxed 20 cent? At 1,000 ringgit, that's not even 0.02%.
I don't think it will reduce significantly, but it just adds on to the cost of doing business.
Yes, and this is something that we're going to be watching very closely for developments. But right now we're heading into the 7:30 news bulletin, and up next, taking a look at the Chinese economy with comments from Gary Ng, Asia Pacific economist at Natixis. Stay tuned, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.